Hey there, welcome to my channel. My nails match my outfit. I didn't even plan it. My name is Linda. Did I say that already? Let's start over. Hey there, welcome to my nails. I'm sorry, y'all. It's the silliness of me. Number 3, hey there, welcome to my channel. My name is Linda. I've got a lot of fun DIY crafts for you today. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Today we'll be working on Rustic Farmhouse fall apple decor using mostly Dollar Tree supplies. So let's get started with project number 1. For this project, I'm bringing these in from Dollar Tree. Now, I know they're supposed to be pumpkins, but when I saw them, I'm like, nope, those aren't pumpkins, those are apples. The tiny little stem, the shape, I'm sorry, I've said it, they're apples. That's what we're going to use. I'm going to use Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color Barn Red, and I'm going to paint all of these up. You could use a green color, you could use a combination of red and green, of course. I'm going to do all red apples. And I'm putting the paint on really thick to make sure I get in all the grooves of this stuff that's around our apples today. And I, of course, as you can see, I have taped off the stem, the tiny little stem, because we do want to use that. I don't want to get red on it. Once the apples are all painted, setting off to dry, I'm going to use this buckle with my broken handle, but that's okay. I'll pop the other one off. And then I'm just going to use some nail polish remover here and a little cotton pad. It takes a little bit of rubbing effort, not too bad. And as you can see here, it goes pretty quick. I'll just do one here on camera for you. I will remove all the rest of the letters off camera. So I have a plain bucket here, as you can see when we're done. And I'm going to use this Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color chocolate, along with some baking soda to make really thick textured paint. I mean, it's really thick. And then I'm just going to use a pouncy brush here, and I want to just kind of add some like muddy, rustic kind of looking areas. And I want the paint really thick to kind of get up and around the lip. And I'm just kind of doing it in whatever places I want, making it really thick in some areas, thin in others, of course. And I'll just do it around the top ledge and the bottom ledge here. And then I'll use my heat tool to kind of dry it up a little bit, as much as I can, because that pail gets awful hot using that heat tool. But I want it to kind of, I hold the heat tool on it nice to kind of bubble up really good. And then I'm going to use this fabric from Walmart, and I've made just a little leaf pattern out of some thin cardboard. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric for each leaf. At first I was only going to do 3 apples, and then I end up doing more apples. But anyway, so I'm just showing you enough 5 leaves, and I've cut some little batting here. You could use felt, and I cut it a little bit smaller than the fabric. I'm going to use Beacon Fabri-Tac glue here. You of course could use a glue gun, and if you are a gluer, just go ahead and sandwich that felt or batting in between your fabric and glue it all together. I'm just adding a little bit of glue on each side just to kind of sandwich that felt, and then I'm going to take my leaves to the sewing machine just to give it some fun texture. But either way, sewing or not sewing, it looks perfectly cute. That cut, and then you can see what it looks like. See, really cute. So I did this off camera. I haven't peeled the stuff off yet. I made a vinyl quote using my Cricut design space. I will have free printables for all my projects today down in the description box, a link to that, so that you could trace it, onto your project or whatever. I'll also have the names of the fonts that I used in case you want to recreate it yourself if you have a Cricut program or Silhouette or something like that. So I got everything centered on here, and now I'm just kind of peeling off the transfer tape off of my letters here. Perfect. And then this is what it looks like when it's done. I think it looks cute with that, thick brown paint and stuff. I have a little board here, and I drilled a little hole in it. It's just a leftover piece of wood, and I have a little dowel here that I'm gluing into that hole that I drilled to make us a little sign. I've got a little piece of paper here that I sewed on. And then I have another piece of vinyl quote here, of course, adding it to my sign so that this can go in with our little apples inside of our bucket. Now, as I'm sitting here gluing this on, I'm thinking I should stain this sign. No, I'll just glue it on. Next scene, took it back off, and now I'm staining it. I couldn't stand it. I was like, I'll just leave it raw wood. It'll look cute. I couldn't stand it. I don't know what happened, but you can see the glue on there dried around it, but that's okay because we'll cover it back up. So staining it using that Waverly wax mixed with water, and just sand a little bit, and then we'll re-glue our sign back on the front here, and this little 50 cents a pound will be included in with the printable. There, that looks much better. Now I'm going to just glue in some styrofoam I got from Dollar Tree into the bottom of our bucket. And then I'm going to start gluing some of our fabric leaves. So my thought was I have 5 apples here. I was going to glue the center apple, 2 leaves, and then on each apple on each side, 1 leaf, and then leave a couple of apples in the front plain. But then in the end, I decided to do all the apples. So some of the apples are done off camera. But you can see how I tucked the leaves inside to the middle of our apple and then took a twine bow there and then just glued it right in front of that stem. So on this side, you're only going to see 1 leaf, tucked it in, fits right nice into that little center, and then glue on the little twine bow right in front there. Perfect, just like that. Go on to the next one, and this one's getting glued on the opposite side. Tucking it in and twine bow. Perfect, because I thought leaves and bows on all of them would be too much, but in the end it wasn't enough. So now I'm taking some moss, I'm just kind of tucking it in. This is really dried out moss I have, so I'm using this around the bottom, and then I'll use the good moss that I like from Walmart to tuck around the top. So here I am tucking my apples in. Now I only did 5 apples because it was all I had, but I think it would look better with more, like 7 or 8 really full. But 5's what I had, so that's what I'm going with. You can see how I'm trying to tuck these in, and now you can see the other 2 apples, I've added the leaves and the bows onto them, and then those are tucked in. See how it could fill with some more apples? Yeah. And then I'm adding the good Walmart moss around to fill in around the edges. And then this is just some fabric I got at Walmart, and I just took it and I ripped about a 1.5 inch strip so it's nice and distressed looking, and tied it into a bow, and I'm going to glue it right up under that front apple there. And then I end up off camera kind of gluing down the tails a little bit to the side so it doesn't block the quote. And then I've got this mesh tubing from Dollar Tree, of course, tied it into a bow, and I'm going to glue it right up on top of that fabric there, kind of tuck it inside. And then our little sign here, I'm going to poke that into our moss, and then that makes this project complete. Let's move on to project number 2. For this project, I have a leftover piece of a 4x4 chunk of wood. It's probably about 5 inches tall, and I'm going to use this Dixie Belt chalk paint in the color Barn Red. We're going to use that a lot today, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint this block of wood. And it could be a smaller size or whatever, you know, obviously, but it's just kind of left over from this great big gigantic spindle that I cut the edge off of because, you know, I know you wanted to know that. Once it's all painted, I'm going to use my sander and like really round off the edges and then kind of distress around the paint. Okay, here's what it looks like when I've got it all done. And then this metal leaf actually comes off of our 4th project today. I rearranged projects in this video here, but I decided I'm going to utilize it versus just throwing it out. So I'm using it to trace it onto some batting. Okay, if you don't have a metal leaf, obviously just cut some batting, make a template, cut some batting and fabric just like we did on the first project. And then I want to also, out of this fabric I got at Hobby Lobby, I am tracing around the leaf, but as you can see, I'm tracing around it about, you know, a 1/4 inch bigger than the metal leaf itself. And I do 2 pieces of batting, 2 pieces of fabric. Now, if you're making your own leaf and not using something metal in between, 1 piece of batting in between 2 pieces of fabric. Again, just like the first project, and just use Fabri-Tac glue or hot glue and glue it together. Since I'm using a metal leaf, taking my Fabri-Tac glue and I'm batting on each side of the leaf so that it just gives a little bit of thickness. You know, it's not just so thin. And I'll have to make a little slit here to get right around that wire there. And then I'll go ahead and start gluing my fabric pieces on. Now I made it bigger all the way around because, yeah, I want to run this through my sewing machine, but obviously I can't sew through metal, right? So made that a little bit bigger all the way around so I have just enough ledge to allow my sewing needle to get around and make those stitches. Okay, so here I'm taking it to my sewing machine and I will sew it nice and slow, so to make sure I'm feeling that metal as I go around and make sure that my needle is only going through fabric. But again, you know, just because I want to utilize the metal leaf, I have it. It's already on curly wires. It'll make it nice and easy to glue onto the top of our apple, that kind of thing. I'll show you here what it looks like in just a minute. And I'm just going nice and slow, as you can see here. And then this is what it looks like, of course. Ready to go. Now I'm going to take a just stem from the backyard. I'm going to glue it onto the top of our wood block here. And then I'm going to add some glue here and some moss around it. And then using my main computer, my Microsoft Publisher program, I'll make sure I have the fonts listed down below for you. I just typed out cute Sweet Orchard apples, nice and easy, onto some tea-stained paper here. I'll put a link down below in the description box where I learned how to tea dye paper, sewed around the edges, and then as you can see, I took the open end of my scissor blades and scraped around it, giving it lots of texture, and now I'm just bending it back and forth to give it even more texture. I'm taking this Ranger Distress Oxide ink in Vintage Photo. You can get this in any scrapbook section, Michael's, Joann's, Hobby Lobby, and just inking around the edges. And then I'm taking some of my favorite mesh tubing here from Dollar Tree, again tied it into a bow, and another strip of that ripped fabric like we used in the first project, and some wire jute cord again from Dollar Tree, wrapping it around a paintbrush handle here, and then a little button. You can get these big things, a button at Walmart, like 500 freaking buttons for like $10. And then I'm using this Distress Oxide ink in peeled paint and a little sponge dauber here, and just kind of inking up my leaf just so that it's not like a flat leaf. It just gives it some, you know, interest and color to it. And then I'll ink up with that Vintage Photo, ink up my bow a little bit just to make it a little bit more rustic looking. Put my lids on the wrong ones. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue the bow down in front of my stem there, and I added glue on the burlap mesh bow here, but then I got, oh, my leaf, I got to glue it in. All that trouble, I'm going to make sure I glue it in. So I'm going to glue it underneath that bow first, kind of bend it where I want it to be, and then I'll get that mesh tubing bow on top and that curly rope wire. I'll tuck it right up under. You have a little bit of working time with this glue. And then I'm going to take that Vintage Photo ink and just kind of ink the top of that stem a little bit so it's not so perfectly cut. And then I'm going to glue down the tails along the side of my apple here. You can let them hang freely, but I'm just kind of spot gluing so I can kind of wrinkle up the fabric, make it look cute. I think this is my favorite project of the whole thing today. It was so easy and I love it. And then I'm going to glue down my little tag here in the center of our bow ensemble and glue down the button. And then that makes this project complete. Let's move on to project number 3. For this project, I'm going to use this tall wood plank board from Dollar Tree, and then this 12-inch slat board also from Dollar Tree. These wood rings, the 6 count, it's the smaller wood rings, and these pumpkins that they're apples. Again, apples. So the slat board, I just cut a little piece off, 5 or 6 inches, and then this big plank board, I cut off diagonal with my jigsaw and a couple inches off the bottom, and then drill a hole. So this is what it looks like. You could use your miter box and saw or anything like that, but you could see the top edge slanted, couple inches off the bottom, the hole drilled so it looks like a tag. And then here's my piece of wood that I cut off of that slat board. I'm also going to use some twine from Dollar Tree, some big rope also from Dollar Tree. This is just some scrapbook paper from my supply, 2 pieces, one to fit our tag and one to fit our little sign. And then I'll take this Waverly Antique Wax mixed with water, some sage chalk paint, and again, barn red chalk paint for our little apples. So I'm staining my tag, nice and soupy, right? My ring and my little sign. And then once those are all painted, I'll set it aside to dry. And then I'm going to move into painting my little apples. I've said it again, these are apples. They just do not look like pumpkins to me. My thought here was to do 1 red and 1 green apple, of course. And when I got done with the red and green apple, I didn't like the color of the green, so I switched to a different color green. And then I'm like, every time I walk by when my project was complete and that red and green apple hanging there, I'm like, nope. So I took the green apple off, and in the final looks, you're going to see 2 red apples. But I left it in to show you. So now I'm coming to my scrapbook paper here, since I didn't show it in the last project, and I talked about sewing on my paper. Or I guess that was in the first project, wasn't it? I'm just sewing on my paper like it's regular fabric, a size 10 needle. I'm using all polyester thread, but all cotton thread works as well. I've got my stitch length set on 4, my tension set on 4, and I just sew. It just adds great subtle texture. You can see what it looks like here. And then once that's complete, I'll go around the edges again with my open end of my scissor blades to scrape along the edges of these papers so that they look all nice and textured here. And you can skip these steps. You don't have to sew your papers, of course. You don't have to add texture or anything like that. But I just think it gives it kind of that country rustic look. And that's the way I love to do it. That's my routine, so I'm sticking with it. Off camera, I'm going to go ahead and distress my large tag and everything with my electric sander, but I'll go ahead in here and I'm just using a little bit of sandpaper and sanding up the apples by hand, of course. If I try to do that with the electric sander, they go flying, but here's what they would look like all distressed. Okay, so here's my board and everything all distressed. We're going to go ahead and add our papers to it. And here is, again, I used my Cricut machine and did a little quote here. Again, free printable, link in my description box. I know it's kind of hard to see on here, but actually in person it looks better. But you know how the camera picks up this kind of plaid paper. So I'm arranging my quote on here. I want Sweet Orchard at the top and then Picked Daily at the bottom. Take my transfer paper off here. And then I'm going to put the apples on to our sign, our little rectangle sign. Okay, going to go ahead and start gluing everything on once those are on there. But yeah, what you could do with the free printable is you can pick the papers you want to use, your scrapbook paper, and you can print it out onto your scrapbook paper, that quote, and then cut your paper to fit your projects. I did that all the time before I got electronic cutting machine. So I've got both papers glued down here, and now I'm going to glue on our little ring just to give it a little something here. If you don't have the ring, you don't need it. I went back and forth whether I wanted the ring. I thought I'd add a little bit more decor. And then we'll go ahead and glue our apple sign into position. Perfect, that's looking cute. And now I'm going to take some of that thinner twine and I'm just going to wrap 3 or 4 times around the top of our tag here and then kind of knot it to the left hand side. And this is where I'm going to hang my little apples off the tails of these twines. And you're probably wondering, how am I going to do that? I'm going to show you. Get everything how long I want the tails. I'll have one tail shorter than the other. Now what I'm doing here is I'm gluing one little end of the twine here and I'm going to glue it to the little stem of that apple on both sides. And then I let that set up. And I'm taking this really thin twine and I'm going to add glue right down into that little recessed area at the top of the apple. And I'm going to take this thin twine and I'm going to wrap it around the rope and the stem to also help secure that in place and not just rely on the glue, because you know that can just kind of pull right off. So I'll wrap it tons here and then I'll show you what it looks like. I wrap it pretty good so it covers it. You can see here what it looks like. And you can also see the different color green of my apple. And then I'm just going to tie it really tight, a little knot here. Perfect. And then I'm just going to cut off really close the tails. All right, got both of those done like that. Here you can see what it looks like with the little knot there. We're going to cover that up, no worries. Now I've got a little twine bow here, and I'm going to glue it right over that knot. That bow, of course, will cover everything up, make it look cute, and everything is nice and secure, and believe me, it is, because when I went to take that green apple off, I had to like cut everything off because that glue holds so good. And now I'm adding in that thicker rope from Dollar Tree, and it's so thick I didn't want to tie like a knot at the end. So I'm taking some of the twine that we've been using on the rest of the tag, and about 2 inches up from the bottom, I'm wrapping it around both pieces of that rope about 5 or 6 times. And then on the back side, I'm going to tie it really tight into a knot. And then I'm going to cut off and leave maybe about a inch long tails here. And I don't want those to show, of course, so I'm going to kind of pull back that wrapped area, add some glue, and then tuck those tails right inside so it's nice and finished off. I'll do that, of course, on the top and the bottom. And once I do that, this project is complete. Let's move on to our last project, number 4, my number 2 favorite project of this series. So this is a pumpkin I got at Walmart, and when I looked at it, I'm like, it's so square looking, it's an apple. What I did with my jigsaw, just cut off those bottom edges and rounded it. And I'll show you here what it looks like when I'm done. See? Totally an apple. Loved it. And you can see that leaf. Here's where I sanded everything off the front, and here's where I took that metal leaf off and used it on that other cute little square wood apple. So what I'm going to do, again, ta-da, bringing in the Barn Red chalk paint from Dixie Belle, and I'm just going to paint the bottom, of course, our beautiful red apple color, front and back. Love how it turns out. I paint just a couple of coats here, and as you can see, I didn't fully take off the stuff of, from it being a pumpkin, because I thought when I sanded it, some of that dark will kind of show through a little bit. And then I'll use this Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color chocolate off camera and paint the stem. So here's what it looks like, all painted, nice and pretty. I need to stand it up, and I was thinking, how am I going to stand it up? Then I remembered I had one of these signs from Dollar Tree, and I went ahead and painted it red, and at some point here at the end, we'll go ahead and glue that on so that our large apple stands up. So off camera, because we've already done this a couple times before, I took some of this ticking fabric from Walmart, and I put some batting in between, one piece of batting, couple pieces of fabric. Again, you can glue it together. I sewed it together, and then I'm just taking my scissors around the edge to fray it up a little bit, and then some of our vintage photo ink there to ink it up, and our leaf is ready to go. I'm going to glue that on, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue some moss in here. Yep, number 2 favorite. So this sign I got at Walmart. They have them now. It's like a set of 3. This is actually one I got last year, but they have them again. It's like a set of 3 hanging signs, and you could leave it like it is. It's totally cute, but I'm going to cover it up, of course. So I'm drilling a couple of holes in here, but see, that would look so cute just as it is. And then I've already sewed around some paper here around the edges, and I'll go ahead and just kind of use my scissor blades here to roughen it up a little bit. The sewing is just, you can barely see it. It's real subtle, but I know it's there. And then, of course, created this on my Cricut. You know it. Free printable in the description box for you. You could print it out onto your paper and then cut your paper to fit your little sign. And if you don't have these at like Walmart, Dollar Tree has those package of 5 or 6 rectangle wood pieces that are plain. You could use one of those. So just adding my quote onto my paper here, peeling nice and slow because this particular paper is really thin. If I peel too fast, it will, rip the paper. Want to go nice and slow on this one. I didn't speed it up too much, so you can see how slow I went. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and glue this onto. I almost hated covering up that apples word, but you know, I want everything that I'm making today to kind of look cohesive and go together. Now I'm just taking a skewer here, poking my holes through, and then I've got some wire. I think this is like 18 gauge wire, and I've just kind of twirled part of it around a paintbrush, and I'm going to stick the straight ends through those drilled holes. I've got about a 3-inch, 4-inch piece here, and then as you can see here, wrapping each end around the paintbrush to give it more of that squiggle look. And then I'll push that and smush it right up against the sign on both sides. Pushing it and smushing it. Gives us that nice, cute little country look. Love how this turned out. And then once that's done, I'm just going to kind of put it right into that moss and use my Fabri-Tac glue here and just glue that right in nice and secure. Don't worry, we of course will cover all of that up. I'm going to bring in some more of that ripped fabric that I tied into a bow, the same fabric we've been using all the way along, because I want everything to look cohesive and go together in a setting, you know, if you want. And then I took some raffia here, tied it in a knot, gluing that down, and then I'll go ahead and just kind of, you know, wrinkle up my fabric here and kind of spot glue it into position so, of course, it doesn't fall into the middle of our sign. And then some of that burlap mesh tubing, tied that in a knot, glue it in, and then this is just some paper-covered wire. I've twirled around a paintbrush, glue that in, and this is some really thick twine you can get at Walmart. Cut 2 pieces and tied them together in a bow. And I'm going to add some more moss up and around that twine. And then I'm going to take a big button and glue that right in the center. And now my sign here sits a little slanted, so I've taken a little piece of scrap wood here, that Dollar Tree slapboard wood, and I just glued it top and bottom underneath that sign so it sits nice and level. And then I'm taking that little easel chalkboard sign thing, of course, and I'm gluing that on the back so that our apple stands up, and that makes this project complete. So I hope you like all of these projects that I made today. Please leave me a comment down below. I know I always say it, but I really want to know with these ones. Which project was your favorite? Again, mine was the square apple, and then this one was my second favorite project because, you know, I know you wanted to know. Please give this video a thumbs up. And if you wandered in here for the first time, you're just checking things out, make sure before you click off, you hit that red subscribe button and notification bell if you like what you saw here today so that you don't miss out on another video from me. Before I go, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. God has called all of us to be champions. He did not make losers, regardless of what you hear from other people or what you may think of yourself. We may not always feel like mighty champions, but God sees us differently than we see ourselves. We see our inadequacies, but God sees the potential in all of us. We are all champions in the heart and eyes of God and what He has in store for us. He has made a path to victory in all that we do. There is never a path that God guides that will lead to second place. The road may have a few speed bumps along the way, but God leads us to the high places. He leads us through the valleys. He parts the sea. He is the God of victory. Listen to where your heart is being led today. Listen to what God has in store for you. Listen to where He wants you to go. Do not depart from His vision. He will keep you safe in the midst of the storm. He will bring you the healing you need. He will continue to move in your heart and life, leading you to the finish line, leading you to victory. When you feel like there is no hope, God says there is. When you see nothing but obstacles, God sees the way forward. When you see what is lacking, God sees that promise of victory. God will always see the solution. I promise. I thank you for sharing your time with me, and I'll talk with you again soon. Bye.